Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be continuing on with the series that I talked about doing in the past. I just haven't really gotten around to, but here I will be ranking every player from Survivor Borneo. And this is something I've been wanting to do for a while, like ranking every player from every season of Survivor, but haven't gotten around to doing it. But with this being close to the 20-year anniversary of the finale of Survivor Borneo, I decided, you know what, let's just do it now for Survivor Borneo here. So again, we will be ranking all 16 players from the season based on how well I feel like they played on that particular season. So let's just jump right into it with number 16. Now, at number 16, you would think that the person on the bottom of the list would be the first boot of the season, as in most situations, I feel like that's probably the case. But here, I didn't really feel like it was the case. So here at number 16, the person I feel like played the worst on Survivor Borneo was BB Anderson. And the real reason for this is because BB didn't really try to play the game. I think BB is someone that I think is smart enough to recognize what he's supposed to do. I think the problem with BB is that he wasn't willing to do those things. He wasn't willing to adapt to the people that were around him. And I think that's something that we'll talk about with a player later on. I think that person does very well. I think BB was just so unwilling to change his ways and unwilling to allow other people to take the lead that caused him to be in such a bad position on his tribe. Now, he also did partially quit the game. He didn't really want to be there. By the time he does go home, he is the second boot of the season, which he was the first boot from his tribe, which in my opinion is just as bad as being the first boot of the season because, again, he didn't survive a single tribal. I mean, he just got kind of lucky that his tribe won that first challenge, and when his tribe didn't win a challenge, he was voted out. So, I mean, I don't consider BB having played good game at all. And really, I mean, that's something I should mention here just in general about Survivor Borneo is something that is tough to rank with a lot of these people is that a lot of these people just weren't playing the game the way that we currently see the game. They weren't looking at this as a really strategic game. A lot of them were thinking that playing strategically was like immoral, like bad people made alliances and all this sort of stuff. And obviously, that's not the way we currently see the game. I feel like because of that, it is kind of harder to rank these people from Survivor Borneo. But I feel like with BB here, for me, it was pretty clear that he played the worst this season. Despite, I think he had a decent mind for the game. It's just he was unwilling to adapt to utilize that mind of the game. So, I mean, for me, lands here at number 16. Now, number 15, we do have the first boot of the season. We have Sonia Christopher, and there isn't really much to say about Sonia. I mean, she was there. She was looked at as the physically weakest, and she got voted out first. I don't think she did much actively bad. I just think that coming into this season, and really any season of Survivor at the age that she came into, I just don't feel like she was destined to do well ever. And because of that, I do think when we go into a general player ranking, when looking at these people as players in the grand scheme of Survivor, I do think Sonia is a worse player than BB because I do think if BB actually tried, I think BB could have done better than Sonia ever could have done. However, when we're looking at this individual season, I don't feel like Sonia made the mistakes that BB did that caused BB to be lower on the list than Sonia. So for me, she lands here at number 15. Now, number 14, we have a player that made it a little bit further than Sonia here, but I felt like he pretty much did nothing in the game either, and that is Dirk. He's kind of a strange figure in the history of Survivor. I think he's probably the most forgettable person on this entire cast. But when we look at his game also, it's just like, what did he really do? I mean, he did have a really close relationship with Shawn, and they did seem to be like a duo while out there. So, I mean, at least you have to give him credit for at least like finding one friend out there. But outside that, I mean, it seemed like he got into confrontations with people. It seemed like he was very much set in his ways with him being extremely religious, and he allowed that to control the way that he played the game. He just didn't really seem to bond with a lot of the other people outside of Shawn. I mean, we see him having a crush on Kelly, but like Kelly just completely rejecting him. And strategically, there just wasn't much there. I mean, again, like Dirk's another one that I really can't say much about because we weren't really shown much about him on the actual show itself. So I can only think of negatives about his game. Despite him being the fifth boot, he didn't make it past a few rounds. But I just have nothing positive to really say about his game, so he lands here at number 14. Now, number 13, we have someone that made it very far into the game, and this might be I don't know if it'll be controversial or not, but again, he got 5th place, but at 13 here, I have Shawn. And I really thought about this one for a while, because the thing about Shawn is that obviously he got 5th place. Like, he made it near the end of the game, and that alone probably would warrant you being a bit higher on this list. However, when I just really thought about it, I thought about how he got there, and I just can't justify putting him higher, especially because, like, one, I just don't think Shawn wins in any scenario. Like, I can't think of a person he sits next to at the end that he gets the votes. It seems like he actively ruined his reputation with the jury. A lot of the Pagong members just simply didn't respect him. And I feel like because of that, I don't see him winning a jury vote. So that's a very big negative. But then also just seeing how clueless he was throughout the game anyway. I mean, in the pre-merge, again, he does have that really close relationship with Dirk, but he is blindsided when Dirk gets voted out by the Alliance. But at the same time, I mean, I think you have to give him credit for being able to not be the one to take the fall there, for being the one that gets saved there. A lot of that being due to his relationship with, like, Rich and Sue. But I think if we look beyond this, once we get to the merge, I think from that point on, he's just so clueless. I don't feel like alphabet strategy was something that was really strategic. Because, I mean, if you really look at it, yes, I mean, the Tagi people that he was close with were towards the end of the alphabet. But at the same time, I think he did a lot of that just to save face. I think, he wanted to have a career after Survivor, wanted to keep a good image there. So, I mean, I do think that's probably the bigger reason why he did the alphabet strategy than for any strategic reason. So again, mixing that in with the fact that I just don't see him winning a jury vote, I just didn't feel like there was any justification for putting Shawn much higher than this. So he is here at number 13. Now number 12, and we're back to someone from the pre-merge again, kind of weird. But this is someone I do think had some potential within the game if she didn't get sick, and that is Ramona. Now, I think Ramona was just given a really bad situation here where she came into the game really sick, and due to that, she had trouble building a lot of bonds earlier on in the game, because I do think she could have been integrated within that majority alliance if she wasn't sick. And despite being sick, she did still bond really closely with Gervais, and we do see that on the show. And she had been integrated within that majority. I do think there's a lot of potential for her to make it much deeper into the game. But my downsides with her are, one, we don't really see anything strategic from her at any point. I don't think there's really any indication that she would have been the type of person that would be in an alliance, be the type of person that was able to maneuver their way to the end of the game on this season. And to be honest, just all this is really just speculation. Like, I mean, there's really no proof of Ramona having the ability to do better if she wasn't sick. It's just my estimation that she would. And because I didn't feel like it was really justified to put her much higher than this. But again, I feel like she did less actively bad to ruin her game than Shawn. So I did feel like number 12 here was a bit justified for Ramona. Now number 11, we're moving on to another pre-merger here. I believe the penultimate pre-merger on the list, and we have Stacey Stillman. And this is a tough one too, because like Stacey is someone that I think had the right strategic mind for the game. We do see her build alliances very early on. See her really bond with Kelly, her trying to pull in Sue, and really, I mean, I think the biggest downside for Stacey Stillman is obviously the fact that she wasn't able to execute on these moves. She wasn't able to actually flip Sue over to her side. She had a very bad social game where a lot of people just didn't like her. Like, we see Sue, we see Rich, we see Rudy all not like Stacey, and that's not particularly great. Now, obviously, there's the like rigging controversy with the third vote, the vote that she goes home on, where she does claim that Shawn and Dirk were convinced to flip against her. And how true is this? I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I do believe certain elements of it. I don't believe that production was like, hey, you guys better vote out Stacey. But I do feel like there was probably more subtle manipulation there, similar to what you would see from like a Big Brother in the diary room. Again, stuff that happens on reality TV all the time. But again, I do think she had a very good strategic mind, and that is why she's as high on the list here. She is at number 11 out of 16, despite being the third boot. But the reason why I can't put her much higher is because I do feel like she just couldn't win the game. I don't really see a situation where Stacey wins the season with how much she annoyed a lot of the people that she was around. Like, even if she were to survive into the merge, I feel like she's just the type of person that isn't going to win a jury vote. So because that, Stacey lands here at number 11. Now number 10. At number 10 here, we have someone that gets a lot of praise on Survivor Borneo, but I think when you really analyze his game, he really didn't play that well. And that is Greg Buis. And Greg is someone that I think had a very sharp mind when it comes to Survivor. I think he actually understood what was going on out there. I think he's just someone that was actively unwilling to play the game. And it's very frustrating because I do feel like Greg had so much potential. I mean, we see that in his boot episode where he tries to bond with Richard. We see him be the leader of Pagong without really being the leader of Pagong. He's shown to be very good socially. He's a very funny and charismatic guy. I think his biggest issue is that he didn't want to play the game. I mean, he's someone that very rarely voted correctly. I believe the only time the entire season that he votes correctly is during the Joel boot. While I do think he's someone that definitely wins if he gets to the end, I don't really see a path for him there, especially after the Pagongs get outplayed by Toggy, and a lot of that was his own doing because he wasn't willing to bring his group together to form an alliance. And again, I just don't look at his game as that impressive on this season, despite him having so much potential to play a very strong game. So because of that, for me, he lands here at number 10. Now at number 9, I have someone that's in a very similar category to Greg, and that is Gretchen. And I feel Gretchen is very similar to Greg. Again, another leader figure from her tribe, someone that was unwilling to play the game, someone that didn't want to build alliances, someone that, again, wasn't really willing to play strategically. But I think something that she does do better than Greg is that she is in the majority for more of the votes. And she's someone that is actively in the majority. She is someone that, again, like on the Joel vote, she is one of the main instigators of that. I mean, she was someone that, in my eyes, was in more control of what was going on strategically on Pagong. And despite her being the merge boot of the season, I mean, really, Greg was going to be the merge boot of that season if he had not won that first immunity. So I do think also in that element, Gretchen was better at managing her threat level than Greg. So for me, I do feel like Gretchen played a slightly better game than Greg. So for me, she lands here at number 9. Now, number 8, we have the final pre-merge player on the list. It might be controversial that he is above Gretchen and Greg, but I do feel like it was warranted for me, and that is Joel Klug. And Joel, I feel like, is someone that, again, had so much potential within the game in terms of his strategic acumen. I do think he's one of the few people on this season that very openly plays strategically. He's very open about the concept of alliances, talks about needing to keep Pagong strong, keep them together, come into the merge. He does have a really strong relationship with Gervais. I think the biggest issue for Joel is his social game. I think he just didn't get on the right foot with a lot of people. He came off as misogynistic to a lot of people, to the point where, like, even though Gervais is the one that actually makes the cow comment, it's Joel that gets the blame for it, which is just really strange. I mean, mind you, I think a lot of that's because Joel was already going home before that. I think that cow comment was just more justification for them to vote out Joel. I think Joel was pretty dead in the water anyway, which again is more indication of just overall, I think his social game was very lacking. But again, when it comes to the strategic element of the game, he had the right idea, and he was so close to making it to the merge. Again, if he made it through that one more round, they made it to the merge with Joel, Joel would probably try to keep that Pagong group together. And if he was able to do that, I could see Pagong very much winning out there. But it wasn't really in the cards. But I do think Joel showed a level of game ability that is much better than what we saw from Gretchen and Greg and all these people that we've talked about already. So for me, I felt like Joel was justified to put here at number 8. Now number 7, and I mean, the rest of the list here are all people that made it decently far into the game. I mean, it's the final 8 minus Shawn. But number 7 here, we have Jenna Lewis. And Jenna is tough to rank because I do think Jenna was probably more of a central figure within the strategy of the game than what was really shown. I mean, she's the person that's very much anti-Joel, and obviously Joel gets taken out there right before the merge. She's one of the people that we do see trying to build that coalition together by time for boot, where they try to get the old Pagongs along with Kelly and Shawn to flip against the Toggies. So, I mean, I do think she had some level of strategic acumen there. Again, not enough to outplay the Toggies at the merge, but I mean, enough there to where I do think it's warranted that she is this high on the list. I think a problem for Jenna is that I don't see her winning a jury vote. I mean, I guess if she was like the underdog and got to the end against like a Sue or a Richard or something, I guess she could win that. But just fundamentally, she seemed like someone that just really annoyed people out there. I mean, a lot of people just talked about how annoying she was, how much she talked. I mean, Greg, Sue, all got confessionals about like how annoying she is. So I mean, I don't think that's particularly great, but I do think she was someone that was more central in the Pagong dynamics than what was really shown on the show. So because of that, she lands here at number 7. Now number 6, we have another Pagong member here, and we have Gervais Peterson. And I think Gervais plays a really fascinating game on this first season because he is someone that does a lot of things wrong. I mean, he's someone that obviously messes up the food eating challenge for them. He's someone that makes that cow comment, but somehow nothing ever blows back on him. Like through this pre-merge, like despite him doing so many things that should have gotten him at least in hot water, he just was never in danger. Now he did lose his allies in Ramona and Joel, but somehow he was still able to get out of that pre-merge still in a decent position where he was still well liked within his tribe. I do think coming to the merge, obviously he messes up that initial vote, but after that, I do think he plays kind of optimally. I mean, I'm putting the votes on Jenna at the Greg vote is kind of questionable, but I mean, at least he does align with Greg and Colleen there. He's part of, again, that coalition that tries to turn against the Toggies. And supposedly that plan would have worked if Shawn didn't turn against them. So I do think there's some natural game ability there. He did seem like he was well liked. He was decent at challenges. It seemed like he was pretty good socially. I just think he missed that killer instinct there. But again, comparing it to the rest of the field, I do feel like 6 is a pretty good number here for Gervais. Now number 5. At number 5, we have someone that is probably a bit lower than I would have expected coming into this list, but I do think this is probably a good spot for him, and that is Rudy Bosch, obviously the 3rd place finisher of the season, and someone that a lot of people say would have won the season. And again, I still question whether he would have won or not. I don't deny it. Like, I don't think there's no way he wins. It's just I don't see where the votes come from. And that's part of the reason why he's as low as he is. He was definitely in a position where he could have won the game. So I think you have to give him credit for that. Like, unlike BB, which is why I mentioned earlier, I think he was someone that was willing to adapt. Something that BB completely failed at, and why he was in early boot is because he wasn't willing to change his ways. I feel like Rudy is someone that was more willing to adapt to the climate that he was in. Now, did he play perfectly? No, because again, I mean, like, supposedly he was going to be the 3rd boot until production got involved, and that's not particularly great. And even then, I mean, like, even if that wasn't the case, he was still in danger. I mean, he still got votes at that tribal. And he was another one that, like, it seemed like he very much got saved at that penultimate challenge before the merge, where he was able to sit out for, like, no reason on the obstacle course challenge, which is something that definitely would have harmed him if that tribe did lose the challenge. I do think Rudy definitely could have been voted out there. So, I mean, that's not particularly great. I do think coming into most given seasons, I do think Rudy is an early boot. However, on the season, he did make it to the merge. And from that point on, again, he was in the majority. While he wasn't the main decision maker within the group, I mean, he was still within the majority, having a say in what goes on, and was able to make it to the final 3 with his main alliance members. So, I mean, I think these are all positives. So for me, lands here at number 5. Now, at number 4, we have the last Pagong on the list here, and for me, that has to be Colleen. I do think as a player, I do think she played all right on this season. Obviously, she has the same missteps that all the other Pagongs had of not grouping together, not making an alliance, but again, I do think she was a fighter. I do think she's a scrapper, someone that was willing to start playing the game once she realized that other people were playing the game. And even by the time she was booted at the final 6, like, she wasn't the main target. Kelly was the main target. If Kelly didn't win immunity, Colleen would have been safe there. And at that point there, without Kelly there, I mean, she only needed to win 3 more immunities, which, I mean, is a decent amount. But with Kelly being the one to win those last 3 immunity challenges, Colleen is the closest in terms of body type and everything to Kelly. So who knows? Maybe Colleen could have won those last few immunity challenges. So I think all that, plus the fact that it seemed like she was good socially, it seemed like a lot of people liked her. I think she definitely wins if she gets to the end, no matter who she's up against. So, I mean, I do think there's definitely a lot of positives about Colleen's game. And I think the negatives that she had are a lot of the same negatives that a lot of the people that we've already talked about had. So for me, she lands here at number 4. Now for the top 3, and the top 3, I mean, it should be pretty clear at this point. Obviously, it's 3 of the Toggy Alliance members, but at number 3 here, we have Kelly Wigglesworth. And I've talked about this in the past. I'm not really too big of a fan of Kelly Wigglesworth's game. I mean, like, going back to my runner-up ranking, I had her ranked really low, and I still stand by that. Because if we look at the game that she played, I do think she starts off very well. I think she starts off, again, being one of those people that are willing to play strategically. She aligns with Stacey, tries to pull in Sue, tries to take over that tribe. Now it fails, and again, you could say that's due to production or whatever, but she does fail at that. But even after that, she's able to regroup, build another alliance with Sue, pull in Rich, and then eventually pull in Rudy, and really hold the numbers throughout the rest of the game. And I do think that is very impressive. The problem with Kelly is that she ruins it for herself. I mean, by the time of the final 8, she starts to distance herself from the alliance. Again, at that point, she was part of the majority alliance. She could have just ran the table, but instead she sketches out the other members of her alliance to the point that they are actively targeting her by the final 6, and she has to win out to get to the end. It's like she actively ruined her game. Like, she was set up for a very strong game. Like, I think if that didn't happen, if she had kept control the rest of the way, I think Kelly Wigglesworth is the number 1 player of the season. I think there's a very good chance Kelly Wigglesworth wins the game if that doesn't happen. Because again, we also got to talk about the Sue move. The fact that she turns on Sue on the revote is just asinine from a strategic standpoint. I mean, it really puts all the blame on Sue's vote out onto you, someone who was supposed to be her closest ally. Like, it's a really, really bad move there that costs her the game. Kelly definitely would have had a much better chance of winning the game had she not flipped on Sue the way that she did. And that's the tough dichotomy with her game, is that I feel like she plays the first half of it extremely well, but then just completely butchers it in the second half and is only saved by the fact that she's able to win out. So overall for me, again, Kelly, very mixed game, but I still think her positives are much higher than any of the people we've talked about so far. So for me, she lands here at number 3. Now for number 2, and again, the top 2 should be pretty obvious here. It's just a matter of what order you have them, and I am going to go with the more obvious answer here. Number 2 here is Sue Hawk. Sue, I think, is someone that is very underrated for her Borneo game. It actually very much surprised me how much I respected her game on the rewatch of Borneo, where she does actually seem to have the most vocal say in what's going on within that alliance, within the Tagi alliance. Obviously, Richard gets a lot of the credit nowadays for forming the alliance, when really, I mean, that's not really true, obviously. I mean, it is Sue and Kelly that were actually in the alliance before they pulled in Rich. Rich is the one that was added on to the alliance afterwards. And I think Sue, even in the first vote, where she's the swing vote on that first vote, and even on this Stacey vote, she's a swing vote in that vote as well. Like, she's in a very good position earlier on in the game, and she is also playing strategically. She's building alliances. I do think, again, that beginning portion of the game you have to give her credit for. I do think she has some social issues. She didn't really seem to get along with a lot of the Pagong members, and I don't think she can win a jury vote. I mean, I find it very tough to believe she wins against anybody in a final 2, which is a major downside of her game. But I do think the fact that she was a very vocal member within that majority alliance and was also one of the founding members of that majority alliance is a great boon, in my opinion, to her game. And to be honest, if she had gotten to the end against Richard, I would have personally voted for Sue. I do think Sue played a more outwardly dominant game than Richard did. I think the problem with Sue is that I don't think she managed her relationships well enough to get to the end. Obviously, Kelly does flip on her, and I think that you have to blame Sue partially for that. That Sue wasn't able to maintain an alliance with Kelly strong enough to have Kelly want to fight to save her. And I'm not saying that Sue played like an all-time great game of Survivor, but I do think when we're looking at the other people on this season, I think it's very clear she plays the second best game of this season. So for me, she lands here at number 2. And now number 1, I mean, we obviously have the winner of the season. We have Richard Hatch. Now, this won't be the case all the time. I won't always have the winner as number 1. But I do think with this season of Survivor Borneo here, I do think Richard Hatch was just leaps and bounds above a lot of the other players on the season from a strategic standpoint. I do think the way that he looked at the game was in a more strategic manner than what we've seen previously. Again, he was someone that threw that final 3 challenge knowing that both of them were going to take him to the end, and that his ideal scenario was to be up against Kelly, as in his mind he doesn't beat Rudy. And I think that's next level strategy at this point in Survivor. So I mean, I think you have to give him credit for that. I mean, it's to the point where like even Jeff Probst himself didn't even understand what Richard was doing. He thought Richard quit the game when he threw the challenge, which is just dumb. I think you also have to give Rich credit for recognizing that him being the fisherman would allow him to gain leverage within his tribe, in the sense that have people be less incentivized to vote him out due to him being the one that caught all the fish. Mind you, obviously the players did catch on to this and started to mock him because of this. And also people called him cocky because of this. So, I mean, there are some downsides to that. But I do think his recognition that that is a thing that he was able to do is still something that was above what a lot of these other players were doing. I mean, he was obviously part of the majority alliance, again another vocal member of that majority alliance, and while Sue was definitely the more outwardly strategic person there, like the one that was outwardly calling the shots. I do think a lot of that was Richard probably more calmly leading her to do things, leading her to want to target certain people, allowing himself to be the one that makes decisions without being the one looked at as the one making decisions. But I mean, overall, I mean, Richard Hatch has a bevy of flaws within his game. Like, despite him being number one on this list, I mean, he has a very flawed game. I mean, he got on a lot of people's nerves. He annoyed a lot of people. He was called overconfident. He does have a few strategic missteps within the season. I do think he gets way too cocky with not thinking that Kelly and Sue could blindside him at some point, which they do talk about, but just never really had the opportunity to do so. But to Rich, it was never even a possibility that that would happen. So it's not like Rich is a perfect player by any means on this season. I mean, he's really not even close. But comparing him to the rest of the field, I do think he was steps above them from a strategic standpoint and from just a pure understanding of what this game truly is. So because of that, for me, Richard Hatch lands here at number one. So there we go. That is my ranking of every player from Survivor Borneo. And again, I would like to continue on this series down the road. I don't know when I'm going to get around to doing so. I do plan on doing a Survivor Australian Outback retrospective around the time of the 20th anniversary from that. So maybe that's when I'll also get around to doing the player ranking for that. But if I do wait for like anniversaries for things, it's just going to take forever to get this series done. So it's like, maybe I'll just say screw it and do them more often. I don't know. But for now, that is my player ranking for Survivor Borneo. Thank you for watching.